أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون، الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غص الفطن، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، العبد المعيد الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين، صاحب العصر والزمان، خليفة الرحمن، إمام الإنس والجان، ولعن الله أعداءهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: إن الحسين مصباح الهدى والسفينة النجاة. دول بيجي محمد وآل محمد. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We praise Him, we glorify Him. We are always in debt to Him. And His dhikr and His praise never leaves our tongue. He's allowed us yet again to gather like this, to come together, to unite, to sit beside each other and recall, remember, commemorate the greatest sacrifice this world has ever seen. And this commemoration, the beginning of the month of Muharram, is a very unique opportunity for all of us to be able now to take the steps that we need to prepare the ground for the arrival of our Imam. On a personal note, I am always honored to be here at Muslim Center. I consider it my home, and it's been many, many years since I've been here. And for me to spend the next 12 nights with all of you is definitely my honor. And on a personal note, I deem it as part of my responsibility to thank all of you, especially Sheikh Jafri, especially the management committee, and those of you who have reached out to me regarding my son and the du'as and the messages and the text messages and the phone calls and the visits to the hospital. I am indebted to all of you and your du'as. Alhamdulillah, he's progressing very well and will continue to progress very well with your du'as, inshallah. And I thank you from me and my family for the outpouring of love and support. May Allah protect your families, keep them healthy always, inshallah. And at the same time, I'm also honored to be part of this community in these next 12 months. And I wanted to spend tonight being the last day before the start of the month being tomorrow, to kind of lay the grounds and talk a little bit about the etiquettes of Asad. There seems to be a shift, there seems to be a little bit of a movement, there seems to be a change that's trying to be forced upon this commemoration that's been happening now for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I'm concerned, and all of you should be concerned. I know my adults and my elders are also very concerned about certain aspects and principles and dimensions that are either being removed from this commemoration or being replaced or being questioned, and it concerns me. And so tonight, kind of set the tone for next night, and we'll go through my topic tomorrow, inshallah. I definitely have a topic, as many of you know, and we'll describe that topic and set the grounds the next 10 nights and 12 nights tomorrow. Tonight, however, a little bit of the tahdib, the etiquette, the adab of Asad is important for us. So not only for us, but of course for our small kids as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa alayhi. You see, I've always say this, and I say it many times, and I'm sure all of you agree. I've never seen a nation that anticipates and prepares itself for grief the way that we do. This anticipation for this night, and for lack of a better English word, English is a very weak language. The excitement is somewhat of a positive word, but the anticipation, the countdown until the beginning of the month of Muharram, as if it was a joyous occasion. Alaykum salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You would think that as an outsider examining us as Shias, watching us as we prepare for the arrival of the month of Muharram, you would think that we were planning for a joyous occasion. You would think that perhaps these people have been waiting all year long now for this night. The vigor, the passion, the way that these masajids are converted into this Farsh-e Aza of ours, the way that our homes are converted. There are families out there who pull out suitcases, and they have suitcases that are labeled Muharram clothes, for example. And it comes out, and it's washed, and it's ironed, and the next 12 nights are laid out. People somehow try to, squeeze in a schedule where they can have, let's say, a majas every single day in their home. And essentially what ends up happening is that we prepare to be grieving. We decorate our souls. We anticipate this grief. And the outsider would think, for a moment, and maybe question us, that you're about to enter this very gruesome, gory, detailed story of this battle in the north of Iraq that took place 61st Hijri, where people were trampled, people were beheaded, little kids were left thirsty, women were abused. All these things are there, and yet this nation runs towards them. This nation drags their children towards them. This nation forgets about the fact that tomorrow is a working day. This nation forgets about the fact that tomorrow is a school day. There are people who are dying to be at Karbala right now. If I offered you a ticket tonight, you'd all go. It's a war-torn country, a bombing north anymore. But the idea of in these 10 days, for me, for a moment, to touch and kiss the body of Imam Hussain, I would not for a moment give up that opportunity. Imam Jafri Sadiq, alayhi salatu wassalam, says, may Allah have mercy. May Allah have mercy upon those cheeks that rub themselves against the body of Allah. It's a very ajib commemoration. Right now in every corner of the globe, there is the dhikr of Imam Hussain happening. It pulls people out that, with all due respect, you don't see all year round. This idea of me being home when the dhikr of Hussain has started, it simply isn't an option. It could be the coldest night of the year, and we've all gone through it the past few years. We'll bundle the kids up, we'll pack a whole, you need a whole bag now for your kids. Right? Back in my day, my dad didn't have, an iPad. There wasn't a backpack full of like 8 tons of snacks in there. There wasn't like a big bag of crayons and a huge coloring book. He would say, you sit there and you listen. You don't understand the language, then it's okay. But now we have their own carry-on. The kids have their own suitcases. You come in and they have this home play area. All of that for the idea of me not staying home. We need to recognize this sometimes. Take a step back. And for a moment now, realize that what is this journey that I'm starting on tonight? Some of you, it might be a 10-day journey. Some of you may not start till 7th of Muharram. Some may not start till Yom Ashura. And for some of you, it might be a 2-month journey. For some of you, it might be a life-changing journey. But this commemoration has the potential to change lives. It's changed lives in front of us. It can change our life as well. What I want to do tonight, before we begin our topic tomorrow, is just set the tone. So that together, at least for 12 days, I'm here with you in this physical building, we can walk together and try to achieve something. And I'm right beside you in this journey. But this idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps giving us this opportunity, year in and year out, to come and gather on this farsh and and grant us this blessing of the dhikr of Hussain, one day that blessing will stop. There were those who were here with us last year, not here this year. And as difficult as it is to protect our iman in this society, what we have to do, especially my youth out there, what we have to do sometimes is cling, hold on to, clutch the various tools we have of salvation and hidayah, and use them for what they were meant to be used for. And one of those tools is this very thing. God forbid we treat it as an annual event, as a bunch of rituals, as something we do year in and year out. It could be the year that we simply change ourselves. So what I want to do tonight, like I said, moving forward, is I want to talk about a couple of things. Now, I have this level of comfort with all of you, and you have that level of comfort with all of you. This is not a new community for me, and neither am I new speaker for all of you. So when we have that level of comfort, then you can say things that normally you wouldn't say in a new community. And you don't want to upset me the very first night. I can upset you the very first night, knowing full well you'll be back tomorrow. Because you have nowhere else to go, really. A couple of things. Number one, these gatherings, we have countless traditions, and I'll give you one in a moment, that talk about the sheer energy that these gatherings provide its attendants. Imam Rada alayhi salatu wassalam, talks about the fact that these gatherings, and specifically the gathering of the dhikr of Imam Hussain, revives hearts. And talks about the fact that the effect of this gathering is not only in this world, it can affect you on the day of judgment as well. It says, Man jalasa majlisan yuhya fihi amruna lam yamut qalbuhu. That the one who sits in a gathering where our affairs are mentioned, we are discussed, we are talked about, their hearts lam yamut abadan, their heart never dies. Yawma tamut al-qulub, on the day where the hearts will die of fear, these individuals who sit in these gatherings, their heart will die. So if these gatherings are so special, the way that we actually physically enter these gatherings, everything from the clothes that we wear, everything from how we sit in these gatherings, everything from how we act in these gatherings, has to reflect the energy and the importance of these gatherings. So yes, there is an element, my youth especially out there, where you should stop and think, the libas I'm wearing right now, am I properly wearing the libas that's suitable for this gathering? MashaAllah, I've seen youth, and the MashaAllah is very sarcastic, who they wear and their mashallah, their outfit that night, it doesn't matter if they're at school, at a person's house, 2 o'clock in the morning, or at a masjid Imam Hussain. There's no difference whatsoever. And there should be a difference. Because we know libas has an immense impact on your iman. If the simple shirt of Nabi Yusuf can bring back the vision of Nabi Yaqub, if we have in our hadiths that a man approached the Imam Qadim alayhi salatu wassalam, he knocks on the door of our 7th Imam and says, Mawla, can you give me some hadiyah, some gift, something from your Dasti Mubarak to kind of, inject my love for somebody. The Imam goes in and pulls out a very old looking shirt. He says, here. That says, with all due respect, Imam, nothing else that you have that might be a little bit newer, a little bit nicer, you give me this shirt that's old, that looks like it's been worn several times. He says, by Allah, I have prayed 1,000 rakats in this shirt. I'm granting you this. We know from our urafa and sometimes there's the akhlaq that we should in our homes have specific libas for our salat, if we have time. So we know that libas plays a vital role. Equally, when you enter such gatherings like this, and either it's here or it's someone's home or it's some other center, we should reflect that in terms of our physical outlook. Number two, how we sit in these gatherings, how we act in these gatherings. Our generation growing up, our parents were very strict on how we sat. Literally. Our feet would never go out, my knees would never go up, cross-legged. If I got a little bit tired, I might shift a little bit. But my father and that generation, which I think is long gone now, unfortunately, was very strict about how you sat. Because again, we have these traditions that you've heard several times now, mashallah, about the fact that the angels come before we even arrive here, and they spread their wings. And they look forward to gatherings where the Ahlul Bayt are mentioned. And so before anybody comes to Ma'asumin to turn on the lights and turn on the heat and turn on the cameras, the angels come and descend on this place, and they spread their wings here. And so the ulama tell us that every single individual who sits on a farsh where Gham and Hussain is mentioned is sitting on the wing of an angel. You've heard it 1,000 times? And the last person to leave this building, locked up, everything is off, the angel gathers his wings and begins his ascension back up to the heavens. And as he passes by other angels, he leaves off this smell, this khushbu, that's unlike anything they've ever smelled. And the angels asked him, where have you been? What is this smell? He said, the smell is the dhikr of Imam Hussain. Now, such a beautiful muqaddas gathering. You're coming here and you're lying down half and you're sitting awkwardly and your legs are spread out. Etiquette involved in here. Just a reminder for myself and for all of you. The second point I want to make is about the emotional dimension of this community. You may or may not know there are movements out there, as I mentioned in the beginning. There are movements out there, especially in the West, from so-called intellectuals and academics who try to bring Imam Hussein's commemoration down to an academic level. To an intellectual level, to a level where they say, look, we don't need to cry, we definitely don't need to beat our chest, we don't need to actually act like we act in terms of the matam and sina zani and the masa'ib. We close off the lights, we recall every single detail of the masa'ib, we all heard it, we all have it memorized, we know exactly on which date, for which person is that masa'ib. Why go through all that? Want to talk about the fact, let's elevate our ibadah. Let's look at Imam Hussain as an intellectual entity. And thus what they try to do is they try to strip the emotional aspect of this commemoration. I've had youth in different cities, different centers, different countries come and talk to me and say, look, on Shabi Ashur we go from here to here to here to here, and we try to catch as much and as many majalises as possible. Why do we do that? Let's sit and discuss Imam Hussain intellectually. Let's make him an academic approach, not an emotional approach. Because emotion and jazba and jazbati, all these things, let us go through. It's a dangerous approach. And I ask my parents out there, along with injecting your child and teaching your child and preaching to your child and educating your child about the importance of attending these gatherings, make sure you also tell the individual, your child, that the entire majlis begins with the marsiyah of Imam Hussain and ends with the ziyarat of Imam. This coming in for a majlis and leaving out when the matam starts, this coming in for masa'ib, crying and leaving, this leaving before masa'ib starts, telling your wife the moment the noha starts, meet me in the parking lot. An entire majlis encompassing. Is the marthiyah included? And unfortunately, we had a beautiful salam today talking about Chande Muharram. It's a beautiful recitation. May Allah bless that brother for reciting it. And half the center was empty. And in fact, I can say this with a lot of confidence. If it's one dimension that we can trace back to the Sira of the Ahlul Bayt, it's the marthiyah. This is the sunnah of our Imams. They would not have a gathering until somebody, some poet, would come forward, recite a few verses of their poetry about Imam Hussain, to the point where the Imams would stop them and say, no, you're not reciting it properly. Recite it as if my grandfather's body is right in front of me. That much emotion. He would recite, they would cry, they would continue on with the program. And this establishment of the institution of martiya and salam and all these things that we don't give any importance to is really the sunnah of the Ahlul Bayt. These are etiquettes of this commemoration. We find out what time will the Muharram sit? 8 o'clock. Okay, let's leave 7:55. Second point, a number of you, a number of us, I'm included in that, we don't give the sinazani and the matam portion of it enough importance. And I'll talk about tears in a moment. Many of us, the moment that the majlis is done, we're gone. Either to avoid traffic, to avoid the parking traffic, or we found out that the barak isn't good today, let's go home. Whatever the case may be. And you're teaching your child that this emotional aspect of Ghani al-Hussain really is not there. Let me share with you a couple of points about the importance of Imam Hussein's tears. You should know by now, and you do know by now, inshallah, that there are certain rules when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt, especially when it comes to their ziyarah. And it seems as if, that's how at least I see it, that all the rules are on one side for every single other Imam, and the rules for Imam Hussain are a little bit different. That exception is always Imam Hussain. For example, those of you who have gone to Masjid, may Allah accept your ziyarah. Those of you who have not, may Allah take you there, inshallah. You know that the etiquette of that ziyarah in Masjid, specifically for Imam Rada, is what? To gather and to get your cleanest libas, that make sure that you are, you have ghusl and you're clean and you smell good, you have itar on, you have the cleanest, the best outfit you have on, and then you walk towards the haram inside Masjid. And that's usually the etiquette for every other ziyarah. But when it comes to Imam Hussain, there's an exception. The exception is that if you read inside these books, they say that you should go to Imam Hussain as you are disheveled. Your hair is a mess. There's khak in your hair. You're going as if you have just heard about the news of the Shahada. And all these things that were there for other Imams don't exist for Imam Hussain. Shaykh Abbas Qumi rahmatullah alayhi has a book called Nafas al-Mahmum, very famous book, online in English, well translated. In the beginning of his book, he has a chapter on 40 traditions on the azamat and the greatness of only tears shed for Imam Hussain. Just tears rolling down his face. You've heard many of them. Stop and ponder on these things. Stop and ask yourself, why are the Ahlul Bayt painting such a beautiful picture where very famously they say that if a tear is the size of a wing of a mosquito, all your sins are forgiven. Past and present, known and forgotten, hidden and private, public and private, all these things, they're all forgiven. One wing of a mosquito is how big? One tear is how big? But for Imam Hussain, it has that much power. So we understand that we have stories like this hadith. You have stories like Imam Sajjad for 33 years. That's one thing he did every step of the way, was what ensured that nobody forgot about the gham and the musibat of Imam Hussain. Attend a wedding, very famously, you would say, read the Musab. Pass by an individual who's doing dhibha of an animal, asked him to give this animal some more. Because my father was sacrificed without a drop. Even on his last days of this life, he was crying for his father. 33 years after the waqi of the day of Ashura, Imam Sajjad made sure that he preached one message. Yes, you remember the commemoration? You recall it? No doubt. But the crying part, the gham part, the emotional aspect is very, very important. Why? Let's examine this time. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. To understand why it's important, what they mean, it's a sign, it's a symbol. We have hadiths that tell us that a person who cannot squeeze one tear out has hardened his heart due to the excessive amount of his sins. We have this. Now there are some people in this room who can't cry. They'll say, look, I can't cry. I feel a lot of hum. I'm burning inside. I'm dying inside. Tears don't fall. That's fine. That's a different story altogether. But a person who's not moved by the story and the musibah of Imam Hussain, the hadith says there's something wrong. I'll use a very famous piece of advice that Amir al-Mu'mineen gave his son, Imam Mujtaba alayhi salatu wasalam. He says very famously that the heart of the youth is like uncultivated land. You've heard it 1,000 times. Whatever this youth will plant in that land, that's what will grow, of course. Let's examine this hadith a little bit. Let's work with the example of uncultivated land. Uncultivated means land that's not touched. Now, if you wish to plant anything on that land, dig it up, let's say, for example. If it's become rock hard, it's very difficult for you to dig up that land. If it's soft, if it's ready, it's very easy. But the moment that that land becomes hard, like rock hard, solid hard, it's very difficult for you to prepare that ground for cultivation. Because the shar of this hadith, many of the ulama have said that there are multiple cultivators of that land, being the heart of the youth. One cultivator is a youth himself. One are his parents, one are the ulama, one are the community. Many people have a say in the cultivation of the heart of the youth. But the main cultivator is the youth himself. Now you try to get this land ready for cultivation and you can't. So what do? You sprinkle a little bit of water on it. Make it wet. All of a sudden now it begins to thaw. It begins to soften. Now you can begin to cultivate. The example I also give is Play-Doh. When you have small kids in your house, these are examples you use. Use Play-Doh, use toys. What happens? When you first buy Play-Doh, it's very wet, soft, and mushy, and you can pretty much mold it how you wish. You can build things, you can roll it as a ball, whatever the case may be. The moment that it hardens and begins to crumple in your hands, you can't do much with it. You can try to add water if you're cheap like me and revive the Play-Doh and try to say, oh look, it's brand new, and your daughter won't take it. But ultimately what ends up happening is if the land is hardened, you can't grow anything on it. Inside of our heart, this uncultivated land. We must keep this land from hardening. We have to avoid it from hardening. And part of that process of it hardening, what is used as the softener of that land are the tears that we shed for Imam Hussain. It is a sure sign, a sure symbol, the moment that these tears roll down our face, there still is an opportunity for us to do islah. There's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says one of the best times to do dua is when your eyes are filled with tears. To give you a little bit of what the importance of the tears of Imam Hussain, let me relate to you a hadith from Shaykh Bahai, I believe. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. There's a whole discussion on hurmat of a mu'min, the dignity of a mu'min, protecting it. Allah is the one who gives that izzat. وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. The Quran says the exclusive property of Allah is this izzat, is this respect. He gives it to the Prophet and to the believers. And that's why stripping a mu'min of any respect, either through tuhmat or ghibat, of course, is a major sin. Why? Because that respect was given to him by Allah. Who are you to take that away? To understand the extent of what Allah goes through to ensure that there is respect given to a mu'min, there is a waqi', a hadith that's discussed in one of the books. It talks about those who enter heaven, inshallah. All of you with me, inshallah? Yes? Say salatu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi. There are those, like most of you, mashallah, who will enter heaven straight, without any sort of issues or complications. One-way flight, no stops, nothing. Then there are people like me. On that flight, there's multiple stops before I get to heaven. And they say that those individuals who enter heaven, of course, are individuals who are made for heaven. They look like they're heavenly. From head to toe, they're dripping, they're clean, they're pak, they're tahir, they're muqaddas. They've earned the pleasure of Allah, the ultimate pleasure of Allah, of course, is Jannah. Then there are those individuals in this world who might have to spend a little bit longer in their graves, a little bit longer in barzakh, a little bit time even in the hellfire, to rid them of this, this dirt that they have accumulated over the years. And then, of course, when they are ready for heaven, Allah, of course, will grant them heaven. We have in hadith. But Sheikh Baha'i narrates that there are individuals who, when they go through that very difficult journey to get to heaven, there will be, of course, scars and burns, and it's very evident that this individual didn't come straight into heaven. He went through a very difficult journey and then entered heaven. And he says that it's human nature that if somebody who entered heaven directly witnessed a man who went through a very difficult journey to enter heaven, and it's visible that he went through some difficult phases, he'll ask himself, I wonder what he did in this world to not come to heaven directly. For him to go through this very difficult state of the qabr and barzakh and this and that, and then enter heaven. And this question might even embarrass that man who is now into heaven. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to protect this individual from igniting such questions from others, Sheikh Baha'i says that when they enter heaven, before they even enter heaven, he takes them to a pond. The pond is called Hayawan, pure life. He cleans up this individual, removes all the scars from the very difficult journey, and makes him as if he came into heaven directly. Just so there is obviously no discussion, no question, I wonder what he did, I wonder what he did, I wonder what kind of life he lived. Let's go ask him. And the sheer possibility of embarrassing an individual, even in heaven, Allah does not wish. Takes him to the pond, cleans them, and makes them enter heaven. Sheikh Baha'i says that pond of Hayawan is water from what? Collective tears that are shed for Imam Hussain in this world. And you may think that, say this sounds like a fairy tale. Unicorns and all these great images of yours. But these are not hadiths by the Ahlul Bayt that are made from metaphors or a great story. The point I'm trying to make tonight is that the dhikr of Imam Hussain is one thing, the gham of it. There's a connection I want to make between Imam Hussain and Imam Zaman, Ajjallahu ta'ala Farajul Sharif. Back to the Play-Doh example. We talked about the fact that when Play-Doh is soft, you can mold it how you wish. When our heart that is uncultivated is soft with the tears of Imam Hussain, now it's soft. Right? People who leave this mahfil, who leave this gathering, after really, truly dedicating their emotion to Imam Hussain, the feeling is different. And that feeling is what? Of readiness. And I want all of you, myself included, tonight to ask yourself, what do I expect from myself the next 10 nights, 12 nights? Do I expect myself to be different? There are people, mashallah, who don't wear red for 10 days, who don't turn the TV on for 10 days, who don't, let's say, eat meat for 10 days, who don't sleep on their bed for 10 days. There are all sorts of mini tributes we give to Imam Hussain, and those are all great. May Allah accept all of them. But does Imam Hussain want more from us? We'll get to that tomorrow when we introduce our topic. But tonight, at least, we have to enter the first 10 days of Muharram with a proper niyyat and intention. And maybe, perhaps, we can use this year's commemoration to prepare ourselves for the arrival of that Hussain who's in Ghaibat right now. Maybe. Maybe it's possible. Because the beauty of this commemoration, and again, I go back to the idea that it's such a strange and unique commemoration, that it seems like even though it's 1400 years old, every single year it comes about, it becomes more and more relevant. It's almost as if the principles that Imam Hussain left behind on the day of Ashura have become more fresh every single year. Then what do we do right now? With this world being in chaos right now, terrorism and oppression and ISIS and God knows what else, let's go back to Imam Hussain. What do we do to preserve our families? Let's go back to Imam Hussain. Our communities, how do we unite them? Let's go back to Imam Hussain. Everything goes back to this man who gave his life when? 1400 years ago. His story should have been buried in the history books. Like everyone else's revolution was, but it wasn't, and it isn't. Why? Because he offers principles and solutions for us for things that we're going through today. There's a reason why I started today's khutbah with that famous hadith that he is the salvation, the ark of salvation, and the lantern of guidance for every era and every generation, including this one where we are the muntazarin of Imam Mahdi. There's a reason why the ulama have made this very distinct connection between Ashur and Zuhur. There's a reason why in Duay Nutbah, Imam Hussain is remembered. There's a reason why of the 9 Imams after Imam Hussain, it's only Imam Zamana who's known as the one who will avenge Karbala. There's a reason why in Ziyat al-Ashur, if no Imam is mentioned, Imam Zamana is mentioned. This connection is very real. We have hadiths that tell us that when Imam Zamana will leave this world, it's not Imam Hassan Askari who will give him Gafan and Dafan, it's Imam Hussain. Some ulama believe that. What's that connection? That connection is this, that when Imam Hussain provides that grief, and that gham, and that musibah, and that masa'ib, where our heart now has become softened, it's ready for cultivation. We search now for what? For these various plants to plant in this cultivation. That's step number 2, correct? When you go to plant a garden, the first thing you do is what? Dig up the ground. Dig it up good, get in there. The soil has to be nice and fresh. Then you go and you choose your tomatoes and your cucumbers and your roses, whatever the case may be. Imam Hussain provides the plantation for the ground, and Imam Zamana provides the roots to plant for that ground. Our hearts have to be ready. We have to be able to now identify that this is now our first step towards preparing for the arrival of Jesus. There has to be a connection. And that connection begins with you giving the grief its due importance. Not being afraid to cry. Sitting here through one noha and 2 nohas and doing sinas and standing with respect with your hand on your heart and giving that due respect. It could be in a language you don't understand, that's okay. Imam Hussein's language is universal. Grief is universal. So this connection that we have between Imam Hussain and Imam Zamana is very real. We have to stop and ask ourselves, what do I want to achieve these next 10 days? And let's go out and let's achieve it. One more point I want to make to move towards Asad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So we understand a couple of points. Number 1, there's etiquette and there's tahzeeb and there's protocol when it comes to these gatherings. How you're dressed, how you sit, how you enter. All these things, of course, have to reflect, like I said, the pure nature of this gathering. Number 2 is giving the grief its importance. There's actual instructions that we have that you've heard since you were children. You can't cry, put your head down. You can't put your head down, then fake as if you're crying. Make a face like you're crying. Frown your eyebrows. Put your head down. At least put your hand over your head. At least fake like you're upset. And point number 3 I want to make tonight, and then we'll move into our actual discussion tomorrow, that we need to revive our communities using the dhikr of Imam Hussain. I'll give you a small example. I had an Ustad in Qom who was very in tune with Western politics and would follow the news very carefully here in the West. And sometimes would bounce ideas off us knowing that we're from Canada and the US, etc. This whole Burn the Quran Day that had begun a couple of years back from a church in Florida, if all of you recall, that they had made these threats to have a day where they burn the Quran, etc. This teacher got wind of this movement, and he would ask us, how real is this? Is this Haitian white movement. Who is this man? Does he have influence? If you remember that quote unquote pastor, I mean, he was a unique character, and of course he didn't have any sort of influence on the rest of the nation. His concern, the Ustad, was more or less about the reaction from the Muslims. And he would say that, does everybody come out? Because we had protests during those times that come out, and of course, to preserve the dignity of the Quran, etc., etc. And he would ask, do you have these sorts of programs? Like, yeah, of course we do. He says, does everybody come out? I said, no, everybody does not come out. He said, and yet those people who don't come out, they read the Quran in the homes every single day? I said, yes, they do. And he starts to chuckle. He says, so these people who read the Quran in their homes every single day, that same Quran is being burnt outside their home, but they're quiet. I said, they don't see it. And then he says there are moments that that we have hadith, and you've heard this again, where you're reading the Quran, and the Quran is now sending la'nats back on you. So do you think it's possible that individuals who are sitting there and reading their 50 ayats every single day, and yet when there's a protest to protect the dignity of that same Quran, they're nowhere to be found? So he was confused, what kind of worship is this? I said, well, look, everyone has different levels, etc., etc. This commemoration this year, I don't want it to be such for myself, where we cry for Imam Hussain, we understand Imam Hussain, we know exactly why he did what he did, we know exactly why he left Medina, with his kids, with his women, with his sons and companions, we know exactly why he did. And yet outside of these Hussainiyas and masajids, when the Yazid of our time is uprising and creating all sorts of fitna and oppression and we're quiet, that connection is lost. I don't want Imam Hussain to ever come and question me that, look, you sat there and you heard what I did, but you didn't apply it outside. It's time to apply it outside. You left me in history. You didn't apply me today in the present. You talked about the Yazid in my time. You didn't bother wondering about the Yazid of your time. You talked about the beautiful companions I had on Shabi Ashur. You didn't strive to be the companions of my man. You sat there, you talked about every detail of my Sakina and my Abbas and my Al-Yadfar, and you cried as if they were your children, your brothers and your niece. But the Sakinas and the Al-Yaskars of Pakistan, of Palestine, of Syria, even washed up to shore, all of that is in one ear out the other. So yes, this commemoration becomes very real when sometimes we understand, and maybe a 1% understand, how could it be that an army of men could kill ma'soom, innocent children at the age of 5 or 6 or 8 or 9, and we see it on a daily basis today. We cry for that gham. We're silent about this. Let's use this commemoration as a catalyst, as a trigger, as motivation, to perhaps speed up the process of the arrival of our Imam. By taking what we learn here, by taking this heart of ours that's now ready to be molded and molded towards the arrival of the Imam. Let's use the anger we have when we hear about the way that Umar bin Saad treated Imam Hussain and his army, and use that anger in the rightful way, in the legal way, of course, to uprise and have our voices heard. God forbid we be those individuals who read the Quran in the homes, while that same Quran is being burnt outside the home and we're quiet. God forbid we're one of those people who cry for Imam Hussain, and we don't apply his lessons. There's levels of Azadan. All of you should be aware of this. The lowest level is what? Is Gham Hussain. In terms of the fact that if you bring any individual with half a heart, put him in front of this member and recall and retell the musibah of Imam Hussain and what he went through, and his children, they'll cry, just like you and I do. How many times in India have all of you told me that, we used to carry out this massive julus in the streets of India, and beside me would be a Hindu. I'm wearing black, he's wearing black. I have no shoes on, he has no shoes on. I'm holding an alam, he knows enough for him to stay away from the alam. So from far, he does his tuning. I'm crying, he's crying. I'm beating my chest, he's beating his chest. The julus is over, I go to my Shia home, he goes to his Hindu home. there a difference? There has to be a difference. There has to be a difference. What is that difference? Is it just Ghamil Hussain? It can't be. Imam Hussain expects more from us. Imam Hussain expects more from us. And I say this because it's Masamin Center. I say it because you know me, I know all of you. That we do Imam Hussain a grave injustice when we do the history. He wasn't a historical figure. He wasn't some person to put on a poster with other figures at all. He was a man who stood by himself, achieved the impossible. And we'll talk about that 2 nights from now. We'll talk about the historical resistance of Imam Hussain. Understand this for a moment. My topic for next 10 nights, as announced by Hassan Light, is understanding Imam Hussain through the eyes of resistance and resiliency. Right now, what we need to do is we need to inject ourselves with a level of muqadimat, of resistance, of perseverance, of resiliency. And we'll set the stage for that tomorrow night, inshallah. Tonight, I really want all of us to understand etiquette, the grief of Imam Hussain, the connection between today's era and Imam Hussein's era. And making that connection, if not for anything else, then for us to be able to do what? To sit in front of Imam al-Zamana and say, choose me to be one of yours. Because every single Thursday night we recite that there have been no companions like Imam Hussain. We send our salams to everyone's companions, but for Imam Hussain there's a difference. And we even say that I wish I was there. And if there are any comparisons between the companions of Imam Hussain and any other companions, that one small comparison that some ulama have made are the comparison between Imam Hussein's ashab and Imam Zamana's ashab. What Imam Hussain began on the day of Ashura, Imam Zamana will finish when he arrives. He was the ibtida. Imam Hussain on the day of Ashura was the starting point. Many of us believe that he wiped out Yazid, yet he didn't wipe out Yazid. He taught us what to do in front of Yazid. There's a tafsir called Tafsir Majmul Bayan. And the sahib of that tafsir, he narrates a personal experience that he had, talking about the companions. He says, I was reading one day about the greatness of Imam Hussein's companions. How the Prophet didn't have those companions, how Imam Ali didn't have those companions, how Sayyidah Fatima didn't have those companions, how Imam Rasul didn't. And they were really elevated in these books. He says, for a moment I had a little bit of doubt. How is it possible? The Prophet of Allah didn't have companions like Imam Hussain? That Imam Ali didn't have companions like Imam Hussain? How is it possible? And with that a little bit of doubts, he went to sleep. Alama Tabarisi, rahmatullah alayhi. In his dream, he finds himself on the plains of Karbala, standing in front of Imam Hussain. Imam Hussain says to him that we are going to start salats right now, and the armies will for sure fire at us during salats. Your job, Tabarisi, is to stand in front of Jamaat and block the arrows from coming and striking those who are praying salat. With your shield, with your sword, with your body. Now imagine now you're standing in front of Karbala. On Karbala, Imam Hussain now has a job for you, a role for you, a duty for you. And you think, this is my opportunity now to not just say labbaik ya Hussain, but to show it. With pride, he stands there in front of that Jamaat. And just like Imam Hussain started, the moment he says Allahu Akbar, a shower of arrows were coming towards his Jamaat. One arrow comes right at the Barisi, he can see it coming right in front of his nose, and just before it's about to hit him, he ducked. strikes Imam Hussain in the chest. He says, I woke up upset, in tears, complete panic. I couldn't believe what I just witnessed. Upset the entire day. That same night, of course, he goes to sleep again in the exact same dream. Imam Hussain standing in front of him, this time now with one arrow in his chest, says, Tabarisi, Salat time, we're going to start Jamaat, you stand in front of me. And you block the arrows again. And this time, Tabarisi says that you can't do what you did last night. This is your chance again. Don't let him down. Your Mawla's asking you now. The arrow comes again, and for the second time, he ducks again. And again, for the second time, that arrow strikes Imam Hussain in the chest. The third night, Tabarisi finds himself in front of Imam Hussain with two arrows in his chest. And Imam Hussain looks to Tabarisi and says that you have the audacity to question my ashab. You dare question my Zuhair ibn Qayn? 22 different arrows from head to toe. He stand. When his shield was full, he would throw his body at the arrows of Imam Hussain. To the point where when Imam Hussain was finished, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Zuhair falls and says, Mawla, accept my apology. If I had a little bit more life inside of me, I would take more arrows for you. It's not easy. We want to say Labbaik Ya Mahdi, and absolutely we should say that. But there's amal involved. And that amal starts tonight. This is the arena for it. This is the mahfal for it. This is the gathering for it. Tomorrow is the 1st of Muharram. And the mu'jiza and the miracle nature of Muharram is such that we drown our own grief inside the grief of Hussain. If we are handling or tackling any sort of grief or difficulty, if we just lost a loved one, if we're struggling with this idea that someone close to me just passed away, we take that drop of water and we drop it in the ocean of Ghani Hussain. We don't cry for that drop, we cry for the ocean. So if you are an individual who has lost their Jalan son, somebody at the tender age, somebody who's very, very young, you don't cry for them, you recall that moment. When Ali Akbar falls from the horse and says, Alayka salam, alayka minni salam, ya abata. And that moment where Imam Hussain runs to Ali Akbar. With every other shaheed, Imam Hussain placed the head of that shaheed on his lap. Cleaned the blood from his eyes, cleaned the dirt from his eyes. But with Ali Akbar, he took the cheek of Ali Akbar and put it on his own cheek. You forget about your own son, you remember the son of Hussain. If you're a niece and you have lost your uncle, you think about that moment when a 4-year-old Sakina runs out of the khayma. She sees her Baba Hussain holding the alam. She sees the alam, but she doesn't see the alamdar. She runs out to the Maidan and says, Chacha Abbas, I'm not thirsty anymore. When you think about a brother losing his sister or a sister losing her brother, you think about that moment. When Asr Ashur, Imam Hussain is now leaving the khayma of the women, and from behind him, Mahalan, Mahalan Yabna Zahra. Slow down, O son of Zahra, go slow. Imam Hussain turns around and sees who? Bibi Zainab. And these two had a conversation. And we hear in our books that when Imam Hussain calls out to his different warriors, that where are you? Why don't you rise up from your sleep? Your Hussein's about to mount a horse, and there's not one person here to mount me on the horse. It's at that moment where the sister of Imam Hussain comes out and says, Bhaiya, I'll mount you on the horse. You should know, my brothers and my sisters, when you mount somebody on the horse, either you put your hands out or you put your zanu out. Can you imagine for a moment Bibi Zainab coming forward, putting her knee out, and Imam Hussain stepping on that knee and mounting that horse? This is what a sister and a brother are. Those images that we have of infant children, you think of a 6-month-old Ali Asghar. This is the miracle nature of Imam Hussain. We forget about everybody. We focus our grief towards Imam Hussain. That moment where Imam Hussain brought Ali Asghar out to the Maidan, you tell me anywhere in anyone's book where they say Ali Asghar was crying, was wailing, his hands were moving. Nowhere do we have that. In the books that I've read, at least, we have this idea that Ali Asghar is lying there motionless in the arms of Imam Hussain, such that some poets have said that it wasn't Ali Asghar that he was bringing, it was a juz of the Quran that he was bringing. And yet we know that from a 6-month-old infant, those of you who have babies in your home, you know that when they're thirsty to that extent, they're crying, they're wailing, they're making all sorts of noise. But Ali Asghar doesn't make a single noise. Why? An alim once said it very beautifully. He said, when you take a fish out of water, that fish goes through various stages. When he realizes that water is not coming my way, the first thing he does is he goes from his back to his stomach, his back to his stomach. And when he finally realizes that water is far, far away, he stops doing that. His tail moves left, his tail moves right. The very last stage of a fish out of water, when he realizes that water is not coming to me, he is completely still. His mouth opens, his mouth closes. His mouth opens, his mouth closes. Ali Asghar is on the hands of Imam Hussain. He's motionless. His mouth is opening, his mouth is closed. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسين.